The church lights flickered like the last breaths of a candle. The organ trembled to a stop in the middle of a sweet song that made my stomach twist. My husband, yes, my husband, stood at the altar in a sharp navy suit, holding the hands of my own maid in her glittering white dress. I could smell lilies, heavy and sweet, like a funeral had snuck into a wedding. The pastor lifted his book. If anyone knows a reason. I pressed my palm to the pew and rose. My legs shook, but my voice did not. I object. Every head turned. My husband's face went gray. My maid's smile slipped, fell, and shattered like glass. And then the heavy wooden doors at the back swung open with a bang. A tall man in a dark suit walked down the aisle, carrying a sealed folder and a stern look that could slice stone. "This ceremony is suspended," he said, loud enough to bounce off the stained glass. The room gasped in one long breath. "My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am 82 years old. I am a retired school librarian from a small town in Maine where winters are honest and neighbors borrow sugar with thank-you pies. I used to be blonde like hay in July. Now my hair is silver like a soft moon. I don't have many friends, but the ones I have know that I love quietly and I love deeply. I thought my husband, Thomas, knew that most of all. I was wrong. 2 months ago I got very sick. It started as a cough that would not mind its manners. The doctors said it was pneumonia and something else they didn't like. I grew small inside my big nightgown. Breathing felt like climbing stairs I could not see. The beeping of the hospital machines became my bedtime song. At first, Thomas visited every day. He brought the newspaper and frowned at the puzzles like they were enemies. He would pat my hand and say, "Rest, Ellie. Don't worry about bills or the house. I've got it." I wanted to believe him, but then he stopped looking at me when he spoke. His voice turned brisk, like I was a task to finish. He started talking more to Crystal, our maid, than to me. Crystal was 28 and pretty in a shiny way, always with perfect nail polish and perfume that smelled like candy. She said she liked working for us because old houses feel like movies. One afternoon, I woke from a fever nap and heard whispering near the door. "Thomas! Crystal!" The kind of whisper people use when they think the sick woman is asleep. "It needs to be soon," Crystal said. "Let her rest," Thomas answered, but the care in his voice sounded borrowed. I lay still, eyes closed, and listened to words that made my blood turn to cold sand. Words like power of attorney, DNR, and sell the lake cabin. Words like new rings and venue deposit. Words like we deserve a real wedding. My wedding band felt hot on my finger, as if it was ashamed to be there. The next morning, I asked Thomas about paperwork he had brought. He waved it off with a smile that did not touch his eyes. "Just simple forms, Ellie," he said. "Routine. If you sign, it will make everything easier. Less stress for you." I took the pen. My hand hovered. My mother always told me, "Ellie, never sign what you don't understand." I set the pen down. "I'll wait," I said. Thomas's mouth made a small tight line. After he left, Crystal stayed behind to fluff my pillow. "You're so brave," she said, placing my water glass just out of reach. "Some people fight change. Not you." Her ring finger was bare, but there was a tan line there like a secret. When I asked for the glass, she smiled as if she didn't hear. That night, the nurse, Ruth, a kind woman with rough hands and eyes that had seen everything, leaned close. "You trust your husband?" she asked softly. "I used to," I said. It hurt to say it out loud. "Then trust yourself for now," she said, and she moved my water right where I could reach it. I didn't sleep much. Machines hummed like bees. Somewhere down the hall a television laughed the way televisions do when no one is really listening. At 3 a.m, I pull the hospital tray closer and open the little notebook I keep even when I'm sick. Librarians make lists. It is how we make a loud world quiet. I wrote, "Find a lawyer. Call Maggie. Check the safe. Rings. Maggie is my niece. She is a paralegal in Portland and braver than I ever was at her age." In the morning, when Crystal went to check your insurance, Mrs. W., I called Maggie from the phone under my blanket. "Aunt Ellie," she whispered like a spy. "You sound small. Are you okay?" "No," I said, "and I think something wrong is growing in my house." Maggie came the next day with a tight bun and sharp shoes that made a clicking sound like answers. She looked at the papers Thomas had tried to make me sign. These would give him control of everything, she said. And this revives your DNR when the doctor hasn't even recommended it. She shook her head. No. I felt both weak and strong at once. Weak from illness, strong from truth. When Thomas arrived, Maggie stayed. I watched his face when he saw her. It fell, then climbed back to polite. Good to see you, Mags, he said, using the nickname she hates. Hello, Mr. Whitfield, she said, not offering her hand. Later that week, I asked Ruth to help me check my things at home. Hospitals don't love patients running errands, but Ruth said fresh air helps lungs in fear. At the house, in my bedroom, the safe was half open, like a mouth mid-lie. My wedding ring box sat empty. My grandmother's brooch gone. On the dresser I saw a glossy magazine with a woman in a white gown on the cover. A yellow sticky note on it said, Final fitting, Crystal. I sat. The room tilted. The mirror showed an old woman with storm clouds under her eyes. I felt silly and angry and very, very awake. My mind tried to make softer stories. Maybe they planned a vow renewal party for us when I got better. Maybe the note meant nothing. Maybe the empty ring box was just clumsy hands. But then I opened the closet and found a white garment bag the length of a secret. Inside was a dress that would never fit an 82-year-old woman. On the nightstand, Taylor Swift's song Lover had been scribbled in pink pen on a scrap, with aisle entrance written next to it. The truth sat down beside me on the bed. I was not invited to the wedding of my own husband. Back at the hospital, I told Ruth, they think I will die before Saturday, saying it made my chest ache in a way no machine could read. Ruth nodded like someone who had seen storms rolling before. Can you be out of here by Friday? She asked. If I have to crawl, I said. We both smiled at that, even though crawling might be true. Maggie moved like thunder after that. She found an old friend at the county clerk's office who confirmed what we feared. An application for a marriage license had been started under my husband's name and my maid's. Not approved yet, but in motion. She also called an attorney, Miss Beatrice Sloane, who said in a voice like steel, Your Anne is very much alive and very much married. We will object. We made a plan. Simple and small, like the best library rules. On Friday night, Ruth arranged a quiet discharge for me because sometimes the best medicine is a front row seat. Maggie rented a dark blue sedan and tucked pillows around me like I was a fragile package full of important letters. We went home, but only long enough for me to put on a soft blue dress and my mother's pearl earrings, the only pearls left. At dawn on Saturday, we parked down the street from the lakeside chapel. It sat by the water like a painted storybook. White steps, red door, bell that carried across the trees. People arrived in glitter and smiles, not knowing their smiles were built on my bones. I watched from the shadow of a maple tree. The air tasted like rain, even though the sky was clear. Inside, we stood in the last pew by the side door. The church smelled like wax and lilies. Thomas looked younger than yesterday in the good light. Crystal looked like a bright coin. My heart pounded. My hands were cold. I thought about our first car, our tiny apartment, the pie we burned and ate anyway. I thought about the way he used to look at me when we danced in our socks. I also thought about the empty safe and the empty chair by my hospital bed. The pastor lifted his book. The organ swelled. This was the moment in stories when the hero charges in with trumpets. I had no trumpet. I had old lungs and a voice. If anyone knows a reason why these two. I object, I said, standing. My voice ran up the walls and sat in the rafters like a bird. People turned. Whispers cracked like twigs. Thomas's mouth opened, then closed. Crystal's bouquet slid a little in her hand. And then bang, the red door at the back flew open. A tall man in a dark suit walked in. He held a sealed folder marked with a silver stamp. He did not smile. He did not hurry. He came straight down the aisle, boots steady on the old wood. This ceremony is suspended, he said, stopping at the front. He turned his eyes to Thomas. Sir, you need to come with me. Who are you? Thomas snapped, too loud, too fast. The man flipped the folder open. Papers shone white as bone. Before he could answer, the bell in the tower began to ring on its own, wild and wrong, as if a hand you couldn't see was pulling the rope. The chandelier above us trembled. One crystal prism slipped, then another, tinkling like tiny screams. A hush fell, so heavy it had weight. And then the man in the suit reached out, placed a firm hand on my husband's shoulder, and said in a calm, cold voice I will never forget, "Thomas Whitfield, do not move." The chandelier creaked again. A single screw turned, just a little, just enough to make everyone look up in the same breath. Gasps scattered through the chapel as every face tilted upward. The chandelier groaned like an old tree ready to fall. A child whimpered. Crystal clutched her bouquet, so tightly the petals cracked. My husband, Thomas, froze with that man's hand heavy on his shoulder. "Please, everyone remain calm," the man in the suit ordered, voice sharp but steady. His eyes stayed locked on Thomas. I stood in the pew, heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to shout, to tell people to run, but my throat caught. It was as if time itself was holding its breath. Then, with a metallic snap, the chandelier jolted. Dust rained down, specks of gold and gray. The crowd erupted. Women screamed. Men grabbed their coats. Chairs scraped against the floor. Thomas broke free from the man's grip and shoved Crystal toward the aisle. "Move!" he barked. He didn't look back at me. He didn't look at anyone, just his own escape. But the chandelier didn't fall. Not yet. It dangled, swaying, threatening. The bell outside still rang without rhythm, like an alarm no one had set. My legs wobbled as I gripped the pew. "Out!" the man barked again. "Everyone out now!" The chapel emptied in a storm of footsteps and sobs. My niece Maggie rushed to my side, wrapping her arm under mine. "Aunt Ellie, we need to go." "No," I whispered, my eyes fixed on Thomas and Crystal. They hadn't run outside. They crouched by the altar, fumbling with something. Papers, maybe? Crystal's veil hung crooked, her lipstick smeared. Thomas's hands shook as he stuffed documents into a leather folder. "What are they doing?" Maggie hissed. The man in the suit stepped closer to them. "You are under investigation for fraud and attempted bigamy," he said. His tone was clipped, rehearsed, official. "Thomas Whitfield, Crystal James, your actions are unlawful. These documents prove it." He tapped the folder he carried. "Fraud. Bigamy." The words rang louder than the bell outside. My husband's head snapped up, face twisted. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snarled. Crystal's mascara streamed down her cheeks. "Tom, let's just leave. Let's just go," she begged. But before either of them could move, the chandelier gave one final groan. With a scream of metal, it tore loose. I flinched, bracing for the crash. But instead of falling straight down, it swung like a pendulum. The heavy frame of gold and crystal swung low, smashing into the front pews with a thunder that shook the stained glass. Shards flew across the floor, slicing through white roses scattered from Crystal's bouquet. Thomas dove, dragging Crystal with him. They landed face first on the altar steps, trembling, alive but rattled. The man in the suit didn't move. He stood tall in the center aisle, calm in the chaos, as though he had been expecting this. He closed his folder and looked directly at me. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said evenly, "this is only the beginning." I blinked, my breath catching. "Who are you?" I whispered. Before he could answer, the chapel doors slammed shut. From the outside, the bells stopped ringing. Silence fell, thicker than smoke. And that was when I realized we weren't alone in the chapel anymore. From the shadows near the organ loft, a figure stepped forward. Slow, deliberate, as though each step carried a secret. I couldn't see the face, only the outline. Tall, cloaked in black, holding something long and thin in one hand. Crystal let out a sob. Thomas scrambled to his knees, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The man in the suit shifted, blocking my view of the figure. "Stay behind me," he ordered firmly. But it was too late. The figure raised its hand, and the thing it held glinted under the dim lights. Something sinister was about to happen. The figure in black did not hurry. It stood near the organ loft like a shadow that had learned to walk. In its hand, the long, thin object flashed whenever the broken chandelier crystals caught the light. My mouth went dry. I felt 82 in my bones, and 8 years old in my fear. "Stay behind me, Mrs. Whitfield," the man in the suit repeated. His arm lifted a little, guarding me and Maggie. His voice had that solid weight you hear in courtrooms and weather warnings. Thomas pulled Crystal to her feet. Her veil hung like a torn spiderweb, and her bouquet lay scattered, roses bleeding across the aisle. Thomas tried to straighten his tie, but his hands shook, and it made my heart twist that I still noticed it. The small, human clumsiness of a man who had planned a fake forever. "Who are you?" Thomas barked at the man in the suit, trying to sound bold. It came out small. "Agent Cole," the man said, showing a badge so fast and clean it cut the air. "State Attorney's Office." Crystal gasped. "Tom, I told you this was a bad idea." "Quiet." Thomas hissed through his teeth, eyes darting between Cole and the figure above us. The door stayed shut. The bell stayed quiet. Every breath in the chapel felt loud. I could smell dust and lilies and the cold penny scent of fear. The figure in black raised a hand, not to strike, but to point at the organ. With the other hand, it tapped the long object against the rail. Tap, tap, like a teacher asking for attention. A tiny lamp clicked on above the music stand. The organ keys, old ivory yellow, glowed like teeth. A strip of paper lay there, weighted by a small stone. Agent Cole's jaw tightened. "Whoever you are," he called up, "put the object down and step out where we can see you." Tap, tap. The long object, a conductor's baton. Not a knife, not a gun. A baton, the kind a choir director uses to hold time. "Is this a prank?" Crystal whispered. "Is this part of a ceremony?" "No," I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded steady. "This is not anyone's idea of love." The figure didn't speak. Instead, it tilted its head, as if listening, then pointed again at the strip of paper. Cole looked at me, then at Maggie, then at Thomas. "Stay here," he said, and moved with careful steps down the aisle, past the wreckage of gold and glass. The wood groaned under his shoes. He took the side stairs up to the loft, slow and measured, a man who had walked into trouble before and walked out again. My lungs burn the way they do when I think too fast. I held the pew and thought about the first piano recital I ever went to in this very chapel. A little boy in a blue sweater who forgot the middle of his song and started again, brave and red-cheeked. I thought about promises, about the way people clap when they want a child to succeed, and the way adults hide when they are ashamed. Cole reached the loft. He kept his body angled, one shoulder forward, never turning his back to the figure. He slid the stone away and lifted the strip of paper. From below, I could not read the words, but I saw the way his eyes softened, then hardened. He held it up, just enough for us to see his mouth move as he read silently. Then he lowered it and spoke to the figure, low and even. I could not hear. The figure nodded once. "Agent Cole." Maggie called, her voice tight. "What does it say?" Cole did not answer. He tucked the paper into his inside pocket, then stepped sideways, keeping the figure in view. "We're coming down," he said calmly. "All of us." Slowly, the figure stepped into the small light. I squinted. The black cloak was just a long choir robe. The face, pale, lined, and not young, was familiar in a way that made my heart snag on a memory. White hair tucked under a black cap, eyes like winter water. The baton looked more like a teacher's wand up close, not a weapon. "Mrs. Whitfield," Cole called. "You'll want to hear this." We waited, breath after breath, while the two descended. The figure kept one hand on the rail, one hand at its side, the baton now still. Near the bottom step, the rope caught on a splinter and tore with a soft rip. The figure didn't seem to notice. When they reached the floor, Cole moved aside, letting the figure stand in a slim pool of light beneath the wounded chandelier. The robe opened at the throat. A small silver cross glinted there. "I'm sorry for the fright," the figure said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to scare anyone. The voice slid through my memory and found a shelf. I knew it. I knew it from choir rehearsals and Christmas programs, and the summer I learned to sing alto because the sopranos were full. "Mrs. Merton," I said, surprise lifting my words. "From the chapel choir." She lowered the baton. "Hello, Eleanor," she said softly, like a teacher greeting a child who came back to school after a long illness. "You always had good pitch." Crystal blinked, confused and irritated. "Who is that?" "Harriet Merton," I said. "She kept time for this chapel for 30 years. She knows every hymn by heart. She knows when the windows stick in winter and which boards squeak under the 10th pew." Mrs. Merton nodded once. "And I know when a chandelier is about to fall," she added quietly. "I've been begging for repairs for a decade. Thomas rolled his eyes. So this is about maintenance. His bravado sloshed like cheap wine. He tried to laugh, but it cracked. No, Cole said, leveling him with a look. This is about evidence. He pulled the paper from his pocket and unfolded it. Mrs. Merton found this, tucked into the organ bench after a rehearsal. He glanced at me. A copy was delivered to my office last night. Anonymous. He read aloud, each word falling like a stone into still water. Saturday, Lakeside Chapel. He will marry the maid while the wife is still alive. He took her jewels. He signed her name. The power of attorney is forged. The witness is paid. Stop him before he sells the cabin. Stop him before he buries her with paper. A hush pressed around us. Even the dust seemed to hang and listen. Crystal's mouth opened, then shut. Tom, she said. A squeak of a question attached to his name. Thomas shook his head too fast. Lies, he said. You can't prove. Your handwriting is on the last line. Cole said, almost gently. He turned the paper, so Thomas could see the scrawl at the bottom, an ink splotch TW, and your maid of honor here, he glanced at a stunned bridesmaid, deposited a suspicious check last week from your joint account. I didn't, the bridesmaid stammered, but her eyes gave her away. My chest felt tight. I tried to breathe like the nurse taught me. Slow in, slow out, counting to 4 like steps on old stairs. Heat pricked behind my eyes, but no tears came. Maybe I had used them all. Cole lowered the paper and turned to Mrs. Merton. Ma'am, thank you. We'll take it from here. Mrs. Merton gave me a look that was almost a nod, almost a prayer. She set the baton gently on the nearest pew, as if putting the music to bed. Crystal suddenly stepped forward, face pale under makeup. I didn't know, she whispered. I mean, I knew about the cabin. He said it was in his name. He told me you. She swallowed, glanced at me, winced. You were tired. He said you didn't. He said you wouldn't mind. Her eyes darted to Thomas. You promised me, Tom. You promised we were doing this right. Thomas's jaw pumped like a machine chewing metal. Shut up, he hissed. Don't tell her to shut up, I said, and my voice snapped like a small flag in a hard wind. She's not the only one who believed a story. Agent Cole lifted a hand. We'll speak at the station, he said. Right now. A click. A soft, mechanical click, like a tongue against a tooth. Then another. The sound came from the altar steps, where Thomas had dropped that leather folder. We all turned. From inside the folder, a small red light blinked. Click. Blink. Click. Blink. Cole moved in an instant. He swept the folder up and opened it. Inside lay papers, a cheap fountain pen, a flash drive, and a small box with a blinking diode and a tiny microphone wired to a thin disc. Recorder, Cole said. He was recording everything. Thomas lunged for it. Cole pivoted, fast and clean. The recorder clattered across the steps, skidding to a stop against the rail. Thomas grabbed for it, and in the scramble, his sleeve snagged the edge of the altar cloth. The cloth slid like a snowdrift. 2 tall brass candlesticks wobbled. The left one tipped, fell, and struck the broken crystal on the floor with a sharp chime. The flame jumped to a ribbon from Crystal's bouquet. It hissed, then caught. Pale fire licked up the ribbon and touched the hem of her gown. Fire! Someone shouted from a doorway, maybe the pastor who had crept back in, maybe no one at all. I smelled singed silk, then smoke. Crystal screamed. She slapped at the tiny flame with both hands, panic making her clumsy. Maggie leapt forward, grabbed the abandoned altar runner, and smothered the fire, pressing down hard. It's out, she yelled, voice trembling. It's out. Cole held Thomas by the arm hard. Enough, he said. You're done. But the chapel was not done with us. Above us, as if awakened by heat and fear, the stained-glass window of the Good Shepherd, Jesus with a lamb over his shoulders, let out a sound I have never heard in a church before. It wasn't a crack so much as a sigh. A hairline fracture traced itself from the lamb's eye to the shepherd's hand. The colored panes shivered. Everyone away from the window, Cole ordered. We stepped back, eyes glued to the picture as if it might climb down and speak. The crack slowed, then stopped just at the shepherd's wrist, where the painted hand cradled the lamb's neck. A silence fell, not empty but full, like the space between thunder and its echo. Somewhere under that deep hush, I heard a small sound, paper rubbing paper. The recorder, still blinking, had landed under the first pew. Maggie crouched and slid it free, holding it like a fragile bird. Cole nodded. Good. That's evidence. Crystal let out one long, ragged breath and sank to her knees on the step, mascara making gray tracks down her cheeks. Mrs. Merton hovered close by, hands open, as if ready to help or to bless. Thomas stopped fighting. For the first time since I met him, he looked at me and did not look away. There was something raw in his eyes. Anger, yes. But under it, a scared boy with his hand caught in a drawer. I found my voice again. Why? I asked. It came out soft and broken, but it was the only rope I had. Why did you do this to me? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Because, he said finally, I was tired of waiting for money I already spent. The truth clanged inside my chest like a dropped bell. Cole drew a breath as if to say, you have the right to remain silent. But he didn't get the words out, because the chapel doors flew open, both at once, as if shoved by a storm. Cold like air rushed in and carried a voice with it, clear, young, and ringing like a trumpet you don't see coming. Stop, the voice cried. Don't arrest him yet. There's something you need to hear. I have the other recording. We all turned as a figure stepped into the doorway, hair whipped by the wind, holding up a second black recorder that blinked in rhythm with the first. And when I saw who it was, the floor tilted under me, and the breath I had saved slipped away. It was the maid of honor, the same one who had looked guilty, the same one who had taken the check. Only now she wasn't in on Thomas's plan. She was his daughter. The words hit me harder than the chandelier ever could. His daughter. For a moment the chapel swam in a blur of smoke and fractured light. The woman at the door, the so-called maid of honor, lowered her recorder slightly, as though the weight of her own secret pulled it down. Her hair whipped in the cold air, and her eyes, green like Thomas's when he was young, were fixed on him with fury and grief. Dad, she spat, the word jagged as broken glass. How could you? Thomas staggered back, his face drained of color. Lydia! His voice cracked, a sound I'd never heard from him, not even in anger. What are you doing here? Lydia stepped forward, boots clacking against the chapel floor. What am I doing here? Maybe ask yourself why I've been recording you for weeks. Maybe ask yourself why your own daughter had to play spy because you wouldn't stop lying. She held up the recorder. The red light blinked, blinked, blinked. This is everything. Every word you whispered to Crystal. Every time you laughed about Mom's sickness. Every plan you made to erase her. Gasps shuddered through the few guests who had dared creep back inside. Crystal buried her face in her hands. Cole tightened his grip on Thomas's arm. You don't understand, Thomas said quickly, desperate now, his voice too loud, too brittle. Lydia, it wasn't like that. Not like that. Lydia's laugh was a blade. You told Crystal she'd look better in Mom's pearls than she ever did. You told her the house would finally be yours once Mom was gone. You told her, her voice broke, trembling now. You told her I'd never find out. But I did, and I made sure I had proof. My knees nearly buckled. Maggie tightened her hold on me. Breathe, Aunt Ellie, she whispered. But how could I? My lungs felt wrapped in barbed wire. Cole nodded to Lydia. Bring me the device. But Lydia didn't move. She clutched the recorder to her chest. Not until everyone knows the truth, she said. Not until she. Her eyes darted to me, softer now, full of something I hadn't seen in years. Not until Mom knows I tried to protect her. I blinked at her, stunned. My voice came out thin, like paper tearing. You did this for me? Lydia's jaw quivered. I should have done more, Mom. I should have come sooner. I thought he just made mistakes. But then I heard him planning your funeral like a business deal. Tears streaked down her cheeks. I couldn't let him get away with it. Thomas jerked against Cole's hold. She's lying, he shouted, spit flying. She's jealous. She always hated Crystal. Always hated me moving on. Moving on. My voice rose, surprising me. It echoed in the rafters like a voice stronger than mine. You call marrying my maid while I'm still alive moving on? The guests murmured. The stained glass, Shepherd seemed to stare down at him with cold judgment. Crystal whimpered. Tom, I didn't know she was your daughter. You never told me. Lydia's laugh was bitter. Of course he didn't. He only tells people what keeps them tied to him. Cole lifted his hand. Enough. We'll hear everything at the station. But just as he reached for Lydia's recorder, the chapel lights flickered again. A low rumble rolled through the wooden floorboards, like something shifting deep beneath us. The shattered chandelier swayed where it had landed, its broken pieces glittering like teeth. Everyone froze. Even Cole's steady expression faltered. Then came the sound, sharp, hollow, echoing from the basement below. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, as though something under the chapel was knocking back at us. Crystal screamed and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before she reached it, slammed hard, as though unseen hands shoved it closed. The candle's smoke thickened. The stained glass crack widened with a squeal. The shepherd's painted eyes seemed to darken. And in that moment, I realized the chapel itself was not finished with us. The lies had been dragged into the open, yes. But something deeper, older, and far more sinister had just been awakened. The sound of those 3 knocks still rings in my bones. Not fast, not clumsy. They were deliberate, like a message carved into wood. Everyone in the chapel went still, even the sobs stopped. Only the smoke from the burned ribbon moved, curling toward the ceiling like a warning. Cole's jaw tightened. He looked at the floorboards, then at me. Mrs. Whitfield, was there ever a basement under this chapel? Yes, I whispered. My voice came out brittle, like old paper. A root cellar. During the war, they used it as a shelter. But it was sealed off decades ago. Another knock. Louder this time. The pews rattled. The broken chandelier groaned where it lay in ruins. Crystal whimpered, pressing herself against the wall like she wanted to melt into it. This isn't normal. This isn't normal. Lydia gripped her recorder tighter, her knuckles white. Her eyes flicked to me, desperate, searching. Mom, what is this? I shook my head slowly. I don't know. But I don't think it's about me. Not just me. My eyes slid to Thomas. He was pale, sweating, trembling in Cole's grip. He looked less like a husband, and more like a boy who had stolen bread and been caught. Stop it. Thomas snapped suddenly, his voice rising desperate. This isn't real. Someone's staging this. He pointed at Mrs. Merton, who stood silently by the pew with her hands clasped. It's her. She's always hated me. She's trying to spook us. Mrs. Merton didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed fixed on the altar. I haven't touched that cellar in 30 years, she murmured. But if it knocks, it's because something was locked in and wants out. The words chilled me more than the cold air streaming through the broken doors. Cole pulled his gun, steady as stone. Everyone stays behind me. His voice was calm, but I saw his finger tense on the trigger. Mr. Whitfield, don't move. Miss Whitfield, hand me that recorder. But Lydia shook her head, hugging it to her chest. Not until I know what's under there. The knocks came again. Bang, bang, bang. Faster this time, as though whatever waited below had grown impatient. The floorboards beneath the altar trembled. Dust trickled from the seams. Thomas's mask cracked. He sagged in Cole's grip and whispered hoarsely, No, not now. I heard him, and I understood. He knew. I stepped forward, my hands shaking but my voice firm. What did you do, Thomas? What did you hide down there? He turned his head, eyes darting like a cornered rat. It wasn't supposed to come out. Not now, not today. His lips quivered. I paid them to keep it down there. To keep it quiet. Maggie's hand clutched mine hard. Them? Who? She whispered. Before he could answer, the chapel floor split with a deafening crack. One board snapped, then another, and a dark hole yawned open where the altar once stood tall. Cold air blasted out, heavy with rot and something sour, something alive. And from that hole, a sound rose. Not human, not animal, but a low moan that curled around my spine like icy fingers. Crystal shrieked and bolted again, only to trip over the broken chandelier. Lydia stood frozen, tears streaking her cheeks, recorder still blinking. Cole kept his gun aimed at the opening, his stance unshaken even as the floor trembled. Then, slowly, from the darkness of a cellar, a hand emerged. Not fresh, not clean, but shriveled and gray, the nails long and cracked. It gripped the edge of the broken floorboard and pulled. Another hand followed. Whatever had been locked away was climbing out. The hand that gripped the floorboard was not the hand of a living man. The skin sagged in gray folds, and the veins looked black, as if ink had replaced blood. Gasps rippled through the chapel. Crystal covered her mouth, her sobbing muffled against her palms. Lydia pressed herself against the pew, the recorder still blinking in her hand like a frantic heartbeat. Cole did not lower his gun. "Stay back," he barked, his voice cutting through the panic. "No one moves." But Thomas trembled like a child caught in his worst nightmare. His knees buckled, and his voice was nothing but a cracked whisper. I told them to bury it. I paid for silence. I paid for—" Another hand shot up from the hole. Then a head began to rise, hair matted, face ashen and sunken, eyes hollow yet burning with something unnatural. The thing dragged itself upward, bones groaning as if they had been waiting years to move. The guests who had lingered screamed and fled out the doors. But I could not move. My 82-year-old legs felt nailed to the floor. All I could do was stare. "Thomas Whitfield," the figure moaned. Its voice was layered, half woman, half shadow, each word pulling at the air like chains. "Did you think I would stay buried?" Thomas stumbled backward, shaking his head violently. No, this isn't real. You're dead. You've been dead for 20 years. Cole grabbed his collar, holding him upright. "Who is that?" he demanded. Thomas's lips trembled. His eyes darted to me, then to Lydia, then back to the figure. "My first wife," he croaked. The room spun. My heart stopped, then slammed hard enough to make my chest ache. His first wife, the one he told me had died of illness before I met him? The figure pulled itself fully out of the hole, standing crooked and terrible. Her gown was shredded, soil clinging to the fabric, and a string of pearls hung broken around her neck. She was a corpse, yes, but also something more. Something held together not just by death, but by rage. "You put me here," she hissed. "You stole my life. You stole my voice. And now you try to do it again." Her hollow eyes turned toward me. "He never stops." I shivered, my breath catching. The truth sat like ice in my chest. Thomas had not only plotted to betray me. He had done it before. Lydia's recorder blinked faster, capturing every word. Her face was pale, but she raised her chin. "Mom," she whispered to me, "this is why I recorded him. Because he doesn't just lie. He destroys." Cole kept his weapon trained on the figure, but his other hand was steady on Thomas's shoulder. "You're not going anywhere," he muttered. Thomas finally snapped. He thrashed against Cole's hold, shouting. She wasn't supposed to come back. She wasn't supposed to. But the figure cut him off with a scream, a sound so piercing it rattled the stained glass. The crack in the shepherd's window widened, a jagged lightning bolt slicing through the painted sky. Shards fell and shattered across the floor, scattering colored light like blood and fire. The chapel seemed to breathe with her fury. The air grew colder, heavy with rot and judgment. The corpse wife raised a hand, pointing directly at Thomas. "You cannot marry another while the grave still holds your vows." And before anyone could move, the broken chandelier behind us rattled violently, as if unseen hands were shaking it from below. One of its jagged arms swung and came crashing down, straight toward Thomas. Cole shoved him aside just in time. The metal struck the floor with an ear-splitting crash, missing Thomas by inches. Thomas scrambled, face pale with terror, eyes wild. "Please," he begged, crawling toward me. "Ellie, you have to help me. She'll kill me." And I, Eleanor Whitfield, 82 years old and weak from illness, stared down at the man who had tried to bury me with papers and lies. I had never felt stronger. Thomas clawed at my skirt like a drowning man, his nails digging into the fabric. His eyes, once the eyes I had trusted, were wide and bloodshot. "Ellie," he croaked, "please save me. She'll drag me down there. You don't understand. She's not supposed to be here." I stared at him, my breath shallow but steady. My whole life with this man replayed in fragments. His smile when we first danced, his hand slipping mine the night of my diagnosis, his whisper to Crystal when he thought I slept. And now here he was, begging me, not because he loved me, but because he feared a ghost. The figure, his first wife, the one he claimed had died peacefully, stood taller now, shoulders squared with a strength no grave could crush. Her voice boomed through the chapel, shaking dust from the rafters. "You vowed forever, Thomas Whitfield, And forever does not end with dirt and lies. Cole tried to step between them, gun raised. Ma'am, I don't know what you are, but you need to stop. He'll face justice alive. The corpse wife turned her hollow gaze on him, and even Cole faltered. Justice, she asked. You think courts can hold a man who builds his life on graves? He buried me, and the law wrote my death as pneumonia. He forged, he lied, and he laughed over my bones. Her voice cracked into a growl. Now the grave calls him. The floorboards trembled. Another hole split open, wider, darker. From it came a smell of earth and decay, so strong my stomach churned. The pews groaned as though the chapel itself bent to her will. Crystal shrieked and dropped to her knees. Take him, not me. Please, I didn't know. The figure didn't look at her. Her eyes stayed locked on Thomas. Ellie! Thomas whimpered again, clutching my frail hand now. Please, tell her I changed. Tell her I pulled my hand free. My voice shook, but the words were clear. You never changed, Thomas. You tried to bury me, just like you buried her. The grave is yours to keep. His face crumpled, fury and fear twisting together. You bitter old. The corpse wife lunged forward. Her hands, bony and gray, gripped Thomas's shoulders with a strength no living man could break. He screamed. I panicked raw. Cole moved, but the floor buckled under his weight, forcing him back. Maggie pulled me, and Lydia behind a pew. The recorder blinked wildly, capturing every sound. Release me! Thomas shrieked, thrashing, clawing at her wrists. But she only tightened her grip, her hollow eyes blazing brighter. You will not wed another, she hissed. Your vows are chains, and now your chains are mine. The hole yawned wider. Cold air howled through the chapel like a storm. Thomas's shoes scraped across the wood as she dragged him inch by inch toward the darkness below. His screams cracked into sobs, then into animal panic. Ellie, please, don't let her. I did not move. I did not speak. For once, silence was my justice. With one last shriek, he was pulled into the hole. His body vanished into the dark, swallowed by earth and shadow. The sound cut off, replaced only by the low groan of the chapel, settling back into stillness. The corpse wife stood at the edge, her hollow eyes turning toward me. For a moment, I feared she would reach for me next. Instead, she bowed her head. Her voice, now softer, carried through the silent chapel. Thank you, Eleanor. You gave me truth. Then she stepped backward into the hole. The ground closed over her like water swallowing a stone. Silence. The bell in the tower rang once, slow, solemn, final. Cole lowered his gun, his chest heaving. Maggie held me tightly, her tears wetting my shoulder. Lydia dropped the recorder, her face pale but determined. And I stood, weak in body but stronger than I had ever been. My husband was gone. His lies, his betrayals, his chains, all dragged into the earth. But I knew the story wasn't finished. Because when the last of the dust settled, I noticed something glinting near the altar steps. A small silver locket, half buried in the rubble. It wasn't mine. I bent slowly, my old fingers trembling, and picked it up. On the back was a single word scratched deep, Lydia. The locket trembled in my palm, warm as though it had been carried close to someone's skin, not dragged out of a grave. I turned it over, squinting at the letters etched into the back. Lydia. My daughter's name. Mom! Lydia's voice cracked. She stared at the locket as if she'd seen it before. Her hand half lifted, then dropped to her side. Cole stepped closer, his gun lowered now but still ready. Where did that come from? I don't know, I whispered. My chest ached with each breath, but I couldn't look away from it. But this wasn't mine, and Thomas never gave me jewelry like this. Lydia bit her lip, pale as the stained glass dust around us. I've seen it before. The chapel fell, so still I could hear the creak of old wood under our feet. Maggie frowned. Where? Lydia's eyes filled with tears. She wrapped her arms around herself, like a child hiding from cold. When I was little, I found it in Dad's study. I thought it was mine because of my name. But when I asked him, he snapped at me. He said it belonged to someone else who didn't matter anymore. He locked it away after that. I never saw it again. The words slid through me like knives. My breath hitched. Someone else, who didn't matter. My gaze drifted to the closed floorboards where the corpse wife had vanished. Thomas's first wife. Cole's expression hardened. If this locket belonged to her, then Lydia— He turned to her slowly. "You're not just his daughter. You're hers too, aren't you?" The recorder in Lydia's hand blinked in the silence. She shook her head violently, stepping back. No, that's impossible. My mother was his second wife. She raised me until she died. Mrs. Merton, still clutching her rosary, spoke for the first time since the floor sealed. Her voice was low, but it carried. Thomas lied about many things. He could have lied about that, too. I remember there were whispers. A woman, years ago, who disappeared after the wedding bells stopped ringing. And a little girl who suddenly appeared in town, no mother in sight. Lydia's face crumpled. "No, you're saying—" I reached for her, my frail hand resting on her trembling arm. "Lydia, listen to me. This locket, it was meant for you. That woman, she looked at you with eyes that weren't filled with hate. I saw it. She wasn't pointing at you. She was warning you." Lydia's tears spilled over, fast and messy. Then all this time, she was my real mother? And he buried her. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the steps where Thomas had begged for his life. I recorded him because I thought I was saving you. But all along, I was saving myself, too. Cole crouched beside her, voice steady. "It means you're the heir to her estate. Everything he tried to steal, every document, every property, it falls to you now. Legally, the evidence we've gathered will hold. His crimes won't vanish, even if he's gone." Lydia clutched the locket to her chest, sobbing. She tried to protect me, even from the grave. I knelt beside her, my old knees screaming, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. My voice was soft, shaky, but true. "You're not alone, Lydia. You've never been alone. She gave you this, and now I give you me." The bell in the tower rang once more, softer this time, like a sigh of release. The cold in the air eased. The chapel seemed to breathe again. Mrs. Merton wiped her eyes. "She's gone now. At peace." But as I held Lydia, I noticed the recorder still blinking, faint and steady. When she dropped it onto the pew, the sound it played back wasn't Thomas's voice. It was the corpse wife's. Her whisper slithered through the silence. "This is not the end. Watch the cabin." The words froze me. Maggie met my eyes, her face pale. Cole straightened, every muscle tensing. The cabin. The place Thomas always wanted to sell. The place he whispered about when he thought I slept. Something waited there. Something worse than what we had seen tonight. The name hung in the air like a curse. The cabin. Cole was the first to speak. "We move now. If that's where more evidence is hidden, we can't wait." His voice was clipped urgent, but even he looked unsettled by the whisper echoing from the recorder. Maggie nodded quickly. "It's only 20 minutes from here. Aunt Ellie, can you manage the drive?" I pressed my hand to my chest. My body was weary, my illness heavy, but my spirit had never been sharper. "I can manage. I need to see this through." Lydia clutched the locket in her fist, her tears drying into resolve. "If that's where she wants us to go, then I'm coming too. She was my mother. I deserve the truth." Crystal whimpered near the door, her mascara smeared and dress torn. I can't go back there. Please, don't take me." Cole's gaze sliced through her. "You're not walking free, Miss James. You'll sit in the back of my car. If this ties you further into Thomas's crimes, you'll answer for it." Crystal sagged, too weak to protest. The drive to the cabin was cloaked in silence, broken only by the crunch of tires on gravel and the occasional cough that rattled from my chest. Trees loomed on either side of the road, tall pines whispering secrets to one another in the dark. The moon spilled its pale light like milk over the lake. When we arrived, the sight of the cabin stole my breath. The old place looked hunched, sagging under years of neglect, its shutters crooked, its porch half-rotted. Yet a faint glow leaked from the window, too steady to be moonlight. Cole parked, hand on his gun. "Stay behind me. All of you." We approached slowly. The wooden steps creaked under our weight. Maggie squeezed my arm for courage. Lydia clutched the locket, so tightly her knuckles went white. Cole pushed the door open. The smell hit us first. Damp earth, mold, and something sharper beneath, like iron. Inside, Dust cloaked the furniture, but the glow came from a lantern set on the table. Papers lay scattered across it, ledgers, contracts, and photographs. Cole moved forward, flipping through them with a gloved hand. His jaw tightened. Forged deeds, property transfers. He signed your name, Mrs. Whitfield, over and over. He looked at me grimly. This cabin was his workshop. This is where he built his lies. Lydia's eyes scanned the photos, her face paling. That's me at the lake when I was 7. She picked up another. And her, my real mother. Alive. Smiling. Her voice broke. He kept these. I touched her shoulder gently. He couldn't erase her completely. She found a way to leave a piece of herself for you. Cole gathered the papers into a file. This will bury him legally. But, he paused, frowning. There's something else here. He pulled open a drawer in the desk. Inside lay a small wooden box, carved with strange patterns. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside was a tape recorder. Old. Dusty. But the reels inside gleamed as if recently wound. Cole pressed play. Static filled the cabin, then a voice. Thomas's voice, younger, cocky, certain. She doesn't suspect a thing. The papers are ready. Once she's gone, the estate is mine. If anyone finds out, well, I've done it before. I can do it again. The cabin will keep the rest hidden. Static swallowed the words. Then, faintly, another voice bled through her voice. The corpse wife. You cannot bury me twice, Thomas. The recorder snapped off on its own. The lantern flickered. The walls of the cabin creaked as though something pressed against them from the outside. A low wind howled through the cracks, carrying her whisper once more. The truth is never buried. Finish it. The locket in Lydia's hand grew warm. She gasped, staring at me. Mom, it's glowing. I looked down. The tiny silver heart shimmered with a soft, ghostly light. It pulsed once, twice, then clicked open on its own. Inside was a photograph, faded but clear enough. A young woman, smiling. The corpse wife. And in her arms, a baby with Lydia's eyes. Tears blurred my vision. Lydia pressed her face into my shoulder, sobbing. She wanted me to know. She wanted me to be free. Cole shut the box firmly. This is enough. With these tapes and documents, Thomas's legacy of lies is finished. His crimes won't touch you anymore. But deep in my bones, I knew it wasn't just about crimes. It was about promises that even death couldn't break. The lantern flickered once more, then went out. The cabin plunged into darkness. And in that silence, the bell from the chapel rang across the lake. 3 times. Slow. Final. The story was finished. At least I prayed it was.